So my name is Kathy Sierra. I am joined today by Darma Rodriguez, and Jennifer's here too, Jennifer Fernandez. The three of us work for the Office of Assessment, and the three of us are parts of a very unique club that you guys have just joined. And Darma, Jennifer, and I are all former test chairs. I was at American High School, Hialeah Gardens. Darma comes from Killian High School. And
I see you got a fan here.
Yes. And Jennifer comes from us from a K through 12 charter, so she has a unique perspective. Darma and I are very high school brained, and we tend to think in high school because that's all we know, but Jennifer has the unique perspective of coming from a K through 12, so she kind of helps us out when we're a little lost with elementary. But we want to welcome you today. The reason that we wanted to do this is because when I first became a test chair, there was it was a lot of trial and error, learning by doing, figuring stuff out on my own, asking other test chairs, because it's a very unique job. It's saying the mute button is back on. I'm not sure what's going on. So you guys aren't able to unmute yourselves anymore? Okay, guys, I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry. But yeah, use the chat for now. So a few years ago, when Darma joined the Office of Assessment, we were kind of like commiserating about how difficult it is, especially for a first-year test chair, because it's a unique role. You're the only one in the school that's a test chair, so usually you have to kind of lean on other test chairs from other schools. My training from the test chair that I took over from, she retired, and she basically said, okay, now you're it, and she left the building, and that was kind of it. And at that point, I'd been a math teacher for years. I knew a little Excel, not that much. I didn't ever bother really with email. I figured if it's that important, my department chair will tell me, but it wasn't like I was on my email all the time. So I had to learn a lot of stuff, organizational stuff, technical stuff, and it was a lot of on-the-job learning. So Darma and I a few years ago said, let's put together a session at the beginning of the school year. Usually this session is in September. We're a little later this year. And we said, let's talk about maybe share some helpful resources for test chairs, in the hopes that what we've gone through, what we did, what worked for us, maybe can help them. And what we're going to go over is just basically a real overview of assessment and some things that we've learned along the way, and hopefully some things that we have found helpful will help you guys as well. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me start off by just telling you who to contact when. I know for me, I never knew who I should call, who I should contact, am I allowed to contact them, all that kind of stuff. So Darma put this together for us. So as you can see, oops, excuse me, I'm trying to get everything out of the way. As you can see, the contact information for the downtown office is in the right-hand corner. And I'm going to go through which administrators handle what programs, because all of us, I will get you the link in a second. All of us handle different programs, and I'm going to show you who handles what. So, for example, for the baseline and the mid-year assessments, those are handled by Felicia Mallory and Denitra Collins, and the platform for that is called Performance Matters. So all of those interim assessments are handled through Performance Matters. Also, a lot of the curriculum offices put out, like the district writing test is put out by ELA. I think math does like mini benchmark tests. Those are also put out through Performance Matters. But if you have general questions about the baseline and the interim, you can contact Felicia or Denitra. They also handle access for ELLs, which is your assessment for your ESOL students. That's going to be in January, and that determines what level your ESOL student will be for the next year, or whether they can exit out of the program. Next up All of these assessments, the majority of these are geared towards either elementary or third graders specifically, and those are handled by Maida Cabeza. So you've got the Stanford 10. Those of you that are in elementary schools, those would be an assessment for your K1 and 2 students. We've got the various grade 3 promotions, the portfolio, Iowa, Apprenda, Flickers. Now, Flickers is really handled by the Office of Language Arts, but Maida also acts as a liaison for that. So a lot of times she's a lot easier to get a hold of. And she also handles the PERT, which is for high school students who want to either go to dual enrollment or achieve a concordant score. The FSAA is handled by me, yours truly. I also assist with the FSA team, and our FSA team is Maria Bruguera and Jennifer Fernandez, and they handle everything related to the FSA and the NGSSS EOCs. And by the way, it's the person who was asking for a link. It's right down here. In fact, let me see what happens when I click on it. Let me show you real quick. It's a Google Doc. And hold on, my computer's lagging a little bit, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, so if you click on that link, this is the same information on an Excel sheet for you already there. And we will be sharing this PowerPoint with you. As soon as I'm done with my part, I will put the link in the chat box for you guys to have. All right. So there are some assessments that are handled by different offices. For example, the Office of Advanced Academics, they handle, if you're a high school and you offer the Cambridge exams or the IB exams, you're going to speak to Joette from Advanced Academics. All of the AP, dual enrollment, PSAT, SAT, and ACT is handled by Monsi down at Advanced Academics. SAT and ACT is a little different. They are vendors that contract schools individually. So while the district can serve as sort of a liaison, really for ACT and SAT, a lot of the time we have to have you go to the actual either College Board or the ACT organization if there's a specific question about orders, things like that. I also act as a liaison as well, so when in doubt, I'm more than happy to help. Next up is our Testing Distribution Center. That's where Darma is this morning. Darma is the administrator in charge of TDC, and she is assisted by Maria Vargas. So both of them, what they do is TDC is sort of like the collection center for all of the paper-based materials. So when you need extra books, extra materials, you can place an order and you would go to TDC to pick them up. Some programs, when you're ready to return shipments, go straight to the vendor. Some of them go back to TDC. Darma would be able to assist you with letting you know how to pack things up and where they're supposed to go to. The hours of operation for TDC are right here. For now, there are limited hours of operations. They're closed on Fridays, but during pickup and drop off, they have specific hours for you to come by. And Darma, they don't need to call and make an appointment anymore. Can they just come?
They're going to come. The procedures that we have currently is that you arrive, you either call into us or you pull up to our loading dock and blow the horn, let us know that you're here, and one of the material handlers will come out and provide curbside pickup or drop off.
There you go. And then Darma will go over about the TDC cards, about people who are allowed to pick up materials. Remember, these are secured materials, and you can't always just send your security monitor to pick up unless they've been allowed by the principal to do so. And then we have some links down here that are useful to you. Obviously, the testing calendar, guys, that's going to be, I didn't even bother this year to print out a copy because it's constantly changing. So I just have a bookmarked link and I'm constantly going there. And it'll say in the heading when it's the last time it's been updated. And keep in mind, as you know, I know we've been told all year long, be ready to pivot, be nimble, and that's what we're doing. So a lot of the testing windows have been increased, as you all know, and so just that's an important thing to have for upcoming assessments. this link for the school assessment coordinator info, and that is where all of the PowerPoints, test manuals, or links to where the test manuals would be found, program guides would be listed for you guys to go to. The TDC webpage, which I'll be going over a little bit later, that is specifically for all things TDC, and that would have information about packing up, ordering materials, directions, that kind of stuff. This school assessment coordinator training and resources, let me go to that really quickly. I just wanted to show it to you. Okay, this is something that Darma created. I'm going to go over this in a little bit. We created a YouTube channel over the summer, and Darma created this link, and basically it's wonderful. It tells you the topic of the YouTube video, the actual link to the YouTube video. So if you wanted to, if you're really not sure about Excel and you want a very basic, how do I copy, how do I filter, paste, sort, you can go to this video, and then the documents that we used in the video, the link is right here.
Incidentally, when you guys hover over these links, you'll notice a secondary window pops up. It's the link on that secondary window that you have to click on to activate the link.
Here, let me do that again. So like right here, if I hover on this, it kind of gives me a preview of what it looks like, and then I would click on this.
Correct.
And then open it.
Mm-hmm.
Darma has turned me on to Google Docs. I was, it took me a while, but it's a wonderful tool to share information with your staff, really, guys. And you can control the level of share. That's another video that we have about Google Forms and such. But if you wanted to, like, let's say, publish a testing calendar or an assignment calendar for your staff, you can do it through Google Docs, send it in an email. The staff would get a shareable link. They would click on it, and then you can control their access. You don't want them manipulating it, so you can do it a view only. So
the only caveat, I'm sorry to interrupt, the only caveat with anything Google Drive, whether it's Sheets, Word, Forms, whatever it is that you're using on Google Drive, please remember that that's not proprietary to Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So the district is a major stickler about putting in any employee ID numbers, any student ID, anything that's sensitive, considered sensitive information, you should never include in a Google document. Okay? Do OneDrive if you're going to do that. If you're going to share with your school, then you do OneDrive, because that's behind our firewalls, where Google Drive is not.
All right, and then this is a direct link to our YouTube video, and then below that, these are apps that you're going to find when you sign into the employee portal, the assessment services app. You guys are here, obviously your principal filled out the assessment services app because they let us know that you're the school assessment coordinator for your school, and they also let us know that this was your first year. Accelify, I don't know that much about it, but that is the database for ESE. You can go in through that. File download manager, which, guys, you're going to use that all the time. If you haven't logged onto it yet, we've got a video about it, but that's where you would go in and get all your rosters, download all the student information for your students, and you can create your rosters from the files you get on File Download Manager. And student performance indicators, that is the assessment database. It's also called SPY, and that's where you could look up a student's assessment scores one by one. And again, there's a link again so that you can get this sheet on your own. All right, so communications from the district. Be on the lookout for, first of all, we already talked about the testing calendar. Just make sure that's bookmarked. Make sure you review it every once in a while. Make sure you have the most current version. The way that we officially communicate with you guys is through district briefings. Now, briefings would be sent to your principal and your APs, and then we count on them to forward it to you. But what we also do is when we're about to publish a briefing, we also, once it's published, we also send one out to whomever that we have listed in our school assessment coordinator site. So you would get a briefing that's forwarded from us. What are briefings? Briefings are sort of the official memo that would let you know what, in our case, what assessment is coming up. It would have things like the testing window, who was supposed to test, probably links to the testing manuals or to the program guides, information about test trainings. Oh, face-to-face, yeah, that's not going to happen for a while, unfortunately. So for now, the trainings are going to be through Zoom. But in pre-COVID, we'd have information about where the testing would take, or where the training would take place, and all of that information. And then, of course, screencast, if we happen to have a recorded screencast, the link for that. Be on the lookout for emails. Emails would come from Dr. Sally Shea is our fearless boss. She is the director, the district director of assessment. All of us report directly to her. So she might be able to send out, if there's something that is pending, or that is something that has happened, or she wants you to be aware of something very quickly, she might send you something. Briefings or general communications would come from Barbara Betancourt. She is one of our clerical staff. So she would send out emails on behalf of all of us. You might get individual emails from program administrators from that contact sheet I showed you in slide 2 and 3. Any of those people might be sending you emails, so just be on the lookout for those. And then obviously from Darma and Maria Vargas from the Test Distribution Center, lots of friendly reminders go out from us. We love to communicate with you guys. We like to keep you advised of everything that's going on. So just anything from the Office of Assessment could come from any of those people. What I used to do, because I'm terrible, I would get an email, I got to act on that, and then I forget about it. So I had to make a special folder and make sure every day I went through that folder and made sure that if there was any actionable item that I did it, because you don't always have time to act when an email comes through. It goes into, it registers in your brain, but you don't always have time to act on it, and you might forget. So that's something that I used to do. All of our assessment programs have a program guide that is listed on the web address there. The program guide is something that we've created that basically has the schedule of activities. In other words, what's the schedule going to be, when you're going to get materials, who is being tested, specific information on accommodations, what the accommodations are, who gets the accommodations, because they're not always the same from test to test. So that would be in the program guide. It's also another good thing to have as soon as you know that a test is on the horizon, to get the program guide, and then of course the test manual that's associated with that assessment. All right. Darma, is there anything in the chat that needs to be looked at right now?
So the first thing that we have to do is we need to establish a plan. The testing calendar that we have on the test chairperson's website, which is shown here on this slide, is a calendar that touches on every single exam in the district. So the first thing that we have to do is we need to establish a plan. So the first thing that we have to do is we need to establish a plan. The testing calendar that we have on the test chairperson's website, which is shown here on this slide, is a calendar that touches on every single exam in the district. That is great, except that you're not going to administer every single exam on this testing calendar. You're going to only administer what pertains to your school. So the best way to go about this is pare it down and let's make a calendar specific to your school and the assessments that you'll be administering. So what is that going to look like? You're going to print out that testing calendar, you're going to put it next to you. The way that I used to do it is I used to start highlighting every single test that I knew that I was going to be responsible for, or that was going to be administered at my school. So you're going to gather your information, which is going to consist of, okay, which exams is your school going to administer? Are they going to be CBT or PBT, meaning computer-based or paper-based? You need to get the windows of all of these exams, the time period in which you're being given by the district or by the Department of Education to administer these exams. How many sessions does each exam require? Is it a 2-session test? And in other words, does a student, for example, the ELA, they have to do writing one day, but then reading they got to do day 1 and day 2. You're going to need to know that information. You're going to need to know how many days you're going to require to test all of your students. You're going to need to know how many days you're going to need for makeups. Now, I also want you to write down on this list that you're going to have, or on a spreadsheet, how you're going to organize each assessment. Are you going to organize the assessment by curriculum group? Is algebra going to be testing by algebra class? Or reading 10 by reading 10? How are you going to set this up? Are you going to test by class, or are you going to test alphabetically? Are you going to isolate your paper-based, your SPED, and your ELL populations? How many rooms are you going to use, or are you going to need based on the number of students and the available computers and or seats that you have at your school? Is your school in line with doing multiple sessions, meaning 2 sessions a day? Maybe one starts at 7:30 and the next one starts at 11:10 right after first lunch. Are you going to designate consolidation rooms? Consolidation rooms are rooms that you're going to migrate students into. This is particular to the students like SPED, ESOL, 504s, PBTs that have all-day testing. If you start out with 5 classrooms, are you going to then migrate 4 of those classrooms into 1 classroom or 1 lab so that you can release the other 3 test administrators? Are you going to have a holding room for ELLs, particularly for the speaking part? Some test chairs will do a holding room near that room where the actual testing is taking place, so that it's easier to call the kids in and you keep better control. And then after the kids test, instead of sending them back to the holding room where they can tell their classmates what the test consists of, they get sent back to class. So these are the kinds of things that you guys have to think about, and you need to start getting an idea and formulating your plan. A big important tip, which is best practice, is consider putting a meeting together, setting up a meeting with all your administration, with all your leads, whether it's the security, the head of security, your AP, your principal, your IT person, your custodian, your cafeteria manager. You have to understand that when you move to testing, everyone in that school is affected by your testing schedule. So you have to be mindful of the fact that you may possibly impact everybody at the school. And this is something that doesn't occur to you when you're first putting it together, because you're thinking, well, I'm just going to do this, this, and that. But then the day of testing, you start running into issues and problems. Maybe a classroom went too late, and now you have to, at the last minute, try to coordinate lunch for 30 kids because they had technical difficulties and they weren't able to start on time. But your cafeteria is about to close in 5 minutes and everybody's going to go home. You don't want to spring these problems on these people at the last minute. It causes a lot of friction within the staff, and the last thing that you're going to want is friction with your staff. You need buy-in from all the staff, and you need to make sure that this has to be a team effort. This is too big. It has to be a team effort. So you need to get everybody on board with you. And the best way to do that is communicate to avoid problems. Once you've gathered up all that material, now you got to start looking at, okay, who needs to test? So you're going to, by grade level, start getting the bulk numbers, and by course, you're going to start getting the bulk numbers. How many total students do I need for 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade to test for FSA ELA? How many 5th graders need to test science? How many 5th graders need to 8th graders need to test science? How many algebra students do I have? You get the idea. You're also going to need bulk numbers for your SPED, ESOL, 504 populations, and by default, you'll have a bulk number for the standard students. All this is going to play with one another, and it will all make sense as we go along. You're going to include all applicable assessments for your school. Make sure that you have all your access for ELLs, all your NGSSS, your science, your SAC 10, whatever, your APs, whatever is going on at your school, you want to keep track of and to include on this calendar. And for exams that you're not responsible for, let's say you have an AP coordinator or an ACE coordinator or an IB coordinator, at minimum, you need to speak with that coordinator and put down what the test dates are going to be for that assessment, because you're going to find that in high schools and in middle schools, you're going to get overlap. Okay, so include as many details as possible once you start preparing the calendar. For instance, and I'm not going to go through this, I'm going to show you an example, but you'll have here, include on that calendar though, any teacher planning days, early release days, special school activities, district meetings, anything that could impact your testing plan. Okay, you want to include in there. You want to be aware of anything that would create a conflict for you on testing days. You're also going to want to specify on this calendar which groups are testing paper-based, who's testing computer, when the makeup days are, if you need to adjust bells, if you need to adjust lunch waves, if you need to extend homeroom periods. Any special deviation of your regular schedule, you're going to include it on this calendar. So here's the basic calendar that this I just used to use Word for. I would pull up a calendar template and I'd start loading in all my information. We were a traditional 1 through 6 school, 1st through 6th period. So I would move the school, as you see here, on the 13th, we were doing SPED and ESOL. Well, those kids technically have all day to test. So there was no need to change the scheduling for the school, so those were traditional 1st through 6th periods. On the 15th and 16th, I would move to 2 odd days so that I could get Group 1, their Day 1 testing here, and Group 1, their Day 2 testing here. Who's testing? Grade 9 and Grade 10. What are they testing? FSA reading. If you look over, on the 17th, we had Grad Bash. So I'm not testing that day. And the school is going to remain in a traditional 1 to 6. Then on Monday the 20th, I pick up again. And now I'm doing FSA again, reading grade 9, grade 10, because I'm not done. I'm actually doing grade 2, day 1 here. And I have enough space in my labs to also start Algebra 1, Geometry, and you can tell this is old because I have Algebra 2 here and we don't do Algebra 2 anymore. But I did Algebra 1, Algebra 2 of PBT, day 1 for the same, for Group 1, day 1. And then over here, I'm doing Group 2, day 2. So this is my second reading group. And this is the continuation of my first Algebra EOC group. Okay, I move to an even schedule, and like that, we go through. You don't want to spring changes, scheduling changes on your teachers. Remember, they need time to plan. They need to plan accordingly. If they're going to have kids for 2 hours or an extended period of time or a shortened period of time than what they normally have, they need to know so that they can plan accordingly. So this was just a straight Word document. And then I switched over to Google. And I switched over to Google for several reasons. I could do color coding, was much easier, so I could assign each exam its own color if I wanted to. I could put notes in a section that was only visible to me. I could access this information from my mobile device, which is extremely handy. In fact, to this day, I use my Google Calendar for everything, and I can access it at whatever day, whatever time. I can be sitting at a doctor's office and somebody has a question about when returns are due, and I pop into my calendar and I can tell them immediately immediately. I can also share these calendars. So you can share this calendar school-wide, and you can restrict the level of access that you give to the person you're sharing with. So you can give them full access where they can go in and add and delete information. So perhaps maybe with your AP coordinator, you would share it with them and let them add their own test dates so that you have one big comprehensive testing calendar that doesn't fall 100% on you inputting the information. And then you can share it with all your faculty and your entire staff, because I used to share it with everybody in the building, where they can only view it and they cannot change anything. Down below on the left-hand side here, you'll see that we've written instructions on how to share the calendar. Another suggestion is to take a board. I had this mammoth board, whiteboard, in my office, and I went and I bought electrical tape. And this was after 6 or 7 years. And I wasn't even sure this was going to work as well as it did. And so I never retaped it, and there was shrinking of the tape. So you can see that it started like looking really wonky, but nonetheless, it was effective. I had a glance of 4 months at a time. So the principal came in, the activities director, it didn't matter who came into my office and said, hey, Darma, what about da-da-da-da-da, you know, can I, the district wants the media center for a meeting. Well, the media center was our biggest lab. So I immediately look up there and go, oh, no, 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 no. We're doing FSA reading that week, and I need every lab that we have. No, tell them they can't have it. I'll trade with you. They can have one of the rooms in 4106. It's a smaller room, but if they can deal with that, then they can have that lab. But I need the big labs. So it was very, very useful for us. Also, I would print out my Google Calendar, and I would keep it in a binder. And anytime we had an administrative meeting, which was every week, that binder went into that meeting with me. And if the activities director decided, hey, I'm going to have a pep rally on such and such a date, the first thing that I would do would be reference that calendar and say, no, Mark, you can't have that rally on that day because of this reason or that reason. So it really not only helps you stay ahead of the curve and stay on pace, but it helps you keep everybody informed and avoid misinformation, which would lead to conflicting assignments. So we talked about the benefits of the calendar. It gives you a roadmap when things are due. If you see that, you know, you're 2 weeks away from the opening of the FSA ELA window, then you know you need to start working on your list. You need to start working on those folders. You need to start making sure that you have everything in place. You need to start, if you haven't done so already, you need to start selecting your test administrators, et cetera, et cetera. So what do we do now? The calendar is done, but remember that we have nothing steadfast in the calendar. It's very fluid, and you've done bulk numbers so that you have an idea. You're going to have a swing of about 20 to 30 kids or fewer. It depends on your school. It depends on how transient your population is. For some schools, populations are real transient, so those numbers are constantly shrinking and expanding. But for others, it's very consistent and there's no change. You can do the calendar a month in advance and your numbers aren't going to change. But just be aware that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because you're just trying to get an idea of how many kids, how many rooms, how many test administrators, you know, how many days you're going to need to test, etc. So now it's time to identify the students. Now we're getting closer to the test. Now it's time to really bear down and start putting together the roster of who's testing. When you're at this point, now you need to be detailed. So you're going to look at your assessment, and before you pull that file from File Download Manager, which is the database that holds all the criteria for these students, and that's what you're going to use to determine who needs to test and who doesn't need to test. So and we do have a YouTube video on that. The very first thing that you're going to do is look at your assessment. Think about the assessment that you're giving or preparing for while you're trying to create your file download manager, because you want to make sure that you pull in all the criteria you're going to need. For instance, are you going to, you're going to need name. Do you need course titles or codes? Well, you do if you're going to do any of the FSA EOCs or any of the EOCs, because you need to know civics. You need to know who's sitting in these particular classes. If you're doing the ELAs, then it's by grade level. So you're going to make sure that you pull in that grade level. If you're going to do retakes, then you need to make sure that you include concordant scores or the graduation flag, the new column that's out now, which is super useful. So you need to make sure that that comes in. You're also going to need to make sure that you pull in the accommodations for everybody, the ELL level for everybody, because you need to, that's the only way that you're going to be able to identify who's the 504s, who are the SPEDs, who are the ELLs. All that criteria, you need to make sure that you pull. We do have the ability now in File Download Manager to create templates. My suggestion to you is choose the exam that has the most requirements and the most data that you have to cross-reference. Create a template with all that data and just always use that data or that template, because it's much easier to delete columns that you're not going to need than to be working on a file download manager and be 3 hours or a day into it or 2 days into it and then realize that you forgot to pull down additional information, and now you're at an impasse and you have a decision to make. So now you either learn how to do VLOOKUP or an index match to be able to bring in the information from another download into your working document, or scrap everything you're doing and start all over again. So food for thought. Once you've identified the students, now you're working with concrete numbers. Now you have to start looking at your rooms. When you're looking at rooms, you obviously have to take into consideration, am I looking at computer labs or am I looking at actual rooms? When you're looking at computer labs, you need to make sure that you're going to use labs where all the equipment is functional. You need to go check on all this equipment, because you may have 30 computers sitting there, but only 20 of them work. Doesn't mean you can't use it, but don't assign 30 kids to that lab, because you're going to have a big problem the morning of testing when 10 kids are sitting on useless computers. Likewise, if you're using classrooms, you're going to make sure to try to cluster both labs and classrooms as much as possible. In other words, try to keep them in the same building and close to one another as much as possible, because it'll help for running materials out there, for alleviating for breaks, the proctors, for hallway monitoring. It also take into consideration how busy a hallway might be, how noisy the room might be because of class changes. Because remember, those kids are going to be in there for hours testing, but the rest of the school is moving. So take into consideration the noise level that there is going to be in those rooms. And it's easier to displace teachers into some of those noisier rooms and use the quiet rooms. Like I used to displace everybody on my 3rd floor of one of my buildings, because it was easier to do that than to try to find empty rooms that were in random areas all throughout the school. It just made everything so much more difficult. So I would take everybody on the 3rd floor and displace them to those random rooms that were sitting empty throughout the campus. Now you got to look at test administrators. Now I know we're in the age of COVID, and believe you me, that Kathy and I and Jennifer have talked about this 1,000 times, and this year we would not want to be in your shoes for all the tea in China. This is not a good situation. However, under normal circumstances, you have to have like a method to your madness when you're selecting your test administrators. In other words, you're not going to, if AP tests are still 2 weeks away, don't pull AP teachers to administer your FSA exams. They're still trying to prepare their AP kids. If, however, let's say the first exam that comes through is writing, right? So writing comes up, you can use teachers in non-tested content areas. Use your PE teachers, use your art teachers, use teachers, ROTC if you have, whatever teachers you have in the building that aren't, which is the way that we do it, we used to do it and most schools do it, is that first exam, have it administered by people that aren't prepping other students for their respective exams. Once that first exam is done, those test administrators, let's say after reading, you've gotten writing and reading out of the way, you just made all those English teachers available to start administering math tests. So you put the math teachers to go cover your language arts kids, and now the math tests are going to be administered by the language arts teachers. You could also, depending on, the preference of your school and your administrators at the school, you could just run the math test by the math teachers, the language arts test by the language arts teachers. We used to do that. It's all a matter of preference. There are some administrators that say absolutely no, absolutely not. I don't want you doing that, but you can do that. So have a conversation with the powers that be at your school before you start making some of these decisions to make sure that they're going to be okay with it. Don't take anything for granted. You can look for all the other teachers that you don't use as test administrators. Use them for coverage if they're available. Try to barter with these people and bargain with these people. You need these people, and you need them to have a good disposition, and you need them to be engaged while in those rooms. So you don't want people that are doing this, and they're absolutely furious and they don't want to do it, because chances are they're not going to perform the job the way that they should. So what I always tried to do was I would work with them. If one of them came in and said, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I was like, okay, relax. One of the things that I used to do was that I would do like a buddy system. So I would talk to my counselors and I'd say, listen, I've got this nervous Nellie over here. I need you to go into her room for the first 15 minutes. Just help her get the room started. Once the students are testing, she's going to be fine. She's nervous about just getting the room started. So if you can help her, it's going to take 15 minutes and then you cut out. That worked fabulously. Another thing to consider is quilting your proctoring assignments. If you have teacher Miss Jones available first period, Mr. Floyd available second period, and Miss Brown available third period, well, then have one room covered by Jones, then by Floyd, and then by Brown. And they just go into the same room, and they're still administering the same assessment, and you're quilting. That's the best way to put it. You're kind of just makeshift putting people in as you need them and as they become available. Remember, you can always use co-teachers or paraprofessionals as the second proctor in large rooms. Now you've identified the students you've identified which assessments, you've identified when you're testing them, you've identified the students that are testing, you've identified the rooms you're testing in, and you've identified the test administrators and proctors that you're going to be using, and hall monitors, and your entire staff. Now it's time to notify everybody of their assignments. So how do you do this? One of the things that I did was that I always created notices for the students. You can create individual notices. You can create teacher-specific notices through homeroom or through language arts. If it's your reading, you may want to do that. If it's your math, you do it through your mathematics teachers or science teachers. If it's biology, social studies, if it's civics, you get the point. You can post these lists. If you're going to post, remember, no sensitive information for the students. Take out the date of birth. Hide those columns before you print, or create a new spreadsheet and copy paste onto this new spreadsheet. Be careful when you're doing that you don't mess up any of your rows or information, because if anything goes askew, you're giving everybody all wrong information. Remember, each student should have his or her own row of information all the way across. I would post, and I did it also on our website for the school website, so the parents and students alike could go in and check. I would do the student ID. I would put the date that they're testing, the room that they're testing, and the assessment that they're testing for. That's all the information that I would provide. And when you do that, you have to make absolutely sure that you sort that list in ID order. Otherwise, it's like finding a needle in a haystack if it's a large school. These are 6-digit numbers, and it's virtually impossible if they're all scrambled and you've got 2 or 3 of these lists going. It's impossible for anybody to find the information. We would also send Connect Ed calls advising parents of testing assignments and letting them know, hey, listen, don't schedule any doctor's appointments, refrain from pulling your student out of school early, be mindful that this is a required exam, they need to be here, they need to test. As far as test administrators were concerned, I kept a running list with my sublocator. Something you may want to take into consideration is take advantage of Google Sheets and Google Drive. You can share everything, and it makes it so easy and so seamless. So the sublocator and I would just keep a running list, and as the tests approached, I would start filling out, okay, these are the people that I know for sure are going to serve as test administrators. I have some holes. I'm going to try to fill those holes, but if I can't fill those holes, just know that on this week I still have 2 holes to fill, and we may need a sublocator. It was great for her because she had the heads up, and she was always well ahead of the game to fill in those holes, and we would, or she'd say, hey, Darma, you put for a sub here. I can't get a sub there. I've been trying to get the sub for 2 weeks now, and I can't find anybody. Then I knew I had to look in-house. I had to do something. I had to pare down. Maybe instead of using 10 labs that day, I was going to use 9 and move and tack on another day for testing. And that's why this becomes a very fluid situation. But if you have it all mapped out on a calendar, then it's easy to see and kind of head off the problems and say, okay, well, wait a minute. Can I add another day? You look at your calendar real quick, you see what your window is, and you say, yeah, I'm good to go. I can add another day here. And you make adjustments that way. You're going to notify your teachers not only of their test administration assignments, but of any periods that they're going to be covering, or location assignments. Listen, if somebody is 100% phobic about administering a test, then barter with them and say, okay, then I need you to cover a class, or I need you to serve as a hall proctor, or I need you, and just work with them so that they feel like they're not being put in a terribly uncomfortable situation. You're willing to work with them, but that it has to be a give and take. I used to have teachers give up their planning period because they didn't want to test. It's like, okay, well, then the other thing that we can do is this. Or I would send them with ample time, hey, listen, you've been selected to administer this test on this date. And because I gave them enough lead time, they would email me back and say, Darma, I've had an appointment scheduled for that day, a doctor's appointment, for a month now. And I'd say, no worries. And I'd switch out with somebody else further down my list, and I'd let her know. I'd say, okay, I'm going to take you off of this date, but I'm putting you in on this date. And yeah, no problem. I don't have a conflict with that. So work with your staff is the moral of the story. And then, of course, you're going to inform the cafeteria manager. You're going to inform anybody else that has that works in any area that could be affected by any of your changes, so that they know that that's a hot day, that they got to be on their toes, that you might hit them up for a favor or a change at the last minute because it was unexpected. With the custodians, I would also let them know, my lead custodian, I would also be in the loop with him and let him know the testing dates and say, listen, these rooms by this day need, and I would give them like the day before. If I'm testing on the 17th, I'm telling him by the 15th, close of school, these rooms need to be set up with these number of seats, or desks in there. And the walls need to be stripped. All the chairs need to be facing, all the desks need to be facing in the same direction. You know, make sure the board is clean. Try to delegate as much as possible within reason, obviously, but try to get everybody to help, because it can be, if you're in a large school, this is huge. Let me see. All right, so we've gotten the word out. Remember that you can't have students work on any of this. For you guys that are at the high school level, you have to be very careful if you have student aides, what you're allowing them to help with. They can help check computers, they can help put up signs in the labs, they can help with putting folders together with just the preliminary information. They cannot touch the student authorization tickets, they cannot touch the rosters, they can't touch anything that has any of the sensitive information on it. So here's two ways that I used to inform teachers. The upper right-hand corner shows a memo. This was one memo for each teacher. It told them the dates that they were assigned, the rooms that they were assigned to, what exam they were going to be testing, and then any specific information, where they're picking up materials, who they're contacting for restroom breaks or problems. I would have put my office number on there. I would have told them how to come back and return their materials, where they're dropping them off, et cetera, et cetera. You can do it that way. This was would be created using Word mail merge and an Excel database. In the lower left-hand corner was this chart that I would create, and it would give the date, the exam, the periods, or the time that they were expected to be out of their classroom, the room that they were being assigned to, the type. So this was for AP exams. So it was 3 hours starting at 8 a.m. The teacher that was going to be assigned to proctor, and then any important notices, which meant relocation of their classes, or any of their students who weren't testing, were sent them to, anything like that. That would go out to every single person that was on that chart. So every single teacher that was proctoring would get the same email. And a lot of times I would put, "Congratulations," with a big exclamation mark. "You have been assigned to proctor an upcoming exam," and make it just as, obnoxious as possible, because that's how we rolled. It was all tongue-in-cheek. And then later they'd see me and they go, "Congratulations, right? Yeah, thanks." So, keep it light. So that's one way to go about it. That chart was done on Excel and just copy-pasted into the body of the email. Another, this is for student notices or passes. You can do the same thing. You can either do an individualized pass per student with all pertinent information on it, or you can do these mini passes, which were 3 to a page, and they had just the bare bone basics. So it was the student's name, the student ID, the assigned date, the location, the test, and the test time. And then I would always put this note down here: if testing at 11:10, you must attend first lunch at 10:30. That was so that they could show it to their teacher. If they ordinarily went to second lunch, they could show it to their teacher and say, "Hey, listen, I'm scheduled to test, and this test tells me that I need to go to first lunch to be able to report on time for my test." So these were 3 to a page. And you notice down here, I would always put the teacher and the room number that these passes were being distributed to. So these passes, by and large, are always distributed during homeroom. So when I would cut these, I'm cutting 3 to a page. There's things that you have to do to remember, in the training video that we have on mail merge goes through this, but I'm just going to tell you real briefly. You have to be careful how you organize your data, how you sort those data sheets. However you sort it, that's what's going to print. So if you sort by students, it's going to be a nightmare reorganizing by teacher name 350 passes. However, if you sort by teacher name, now you're going to get all the students for Wilson printing first, then all the students for whomever, and so on and so forth. So it keeps everything together. So At every point, as you're doing this, there's so many steps involved in this entire testing process and every single task that you have to undertake in preparing for these exams. You really need to think through A through Z before you just dive in and start doing it. And think through the entire time as you're going along, because it's better to catch an error early than to wait until you've printed 500 of these things and it's 7 o'clock at night, you're dying to go home, and you look down and you go, oh my gosh, these are all in alpha order, and how am I going to put all this stuff in these boxes, in the mailboxes for the teachers? So think things through. Always be thinking ahead. Set up procedures for absolutely everything. Everything. How you're going to set up your material. How and where will testing materials be distributed and returned to the test administrators, or returned by the test administrators? How are the students going to get checked in the test rooms? How are you going to deal with, cell phones, or a student that's just disruptive, or a student that goes out for a restroom break and never comes back? How are you going to handle breaks for test administrators? Who's going to relieve them? If a room is missing something, how are you going to get stuff out to that room? There are going to be days you're going to be shackled to your desk, and you're not going to be able to run around. Or if you are running around, you're one person and you might have 25 rooms going at the same time. You're going to need help, and you're going to need procedures for everything. And you have to let your test administrators know well ahead of time what the procedures are for everything that could possibly go wrong, because that's your lifeline. You're going to be running all over the place. So create procedures for everything. For instance, my folders, didn't matter what test we were administering, they were always set up the same. In the left pocket, I had created these cover sheets. Anyone who had tested, their authorization tickets or their booklets were going to go behind the green cover sheet. Anybody who was absent was going to go behind the pink, not tested. Anybody who's still testing, meaning that I've relieved the test administrator from the room and I had him or her drop her students off at that consolidation room, they're going to bring this back with detailed information of who they dropped off at that room, what room was it, who the test administrator was, the time that the student got moved into that room, et cetera, et cetera. I would not suggest that you try this your first year. You're going to have too much else going on. But later on, that's a possibility. I would also have all the student authorization tickets on this side of the folder. I would have any of the ancillary materials, the work folders, worksheets, planning sheets, the formula sheets, any of that would be there also, and the rosters. And then lastly, the back to class passes. That's my left pocket. Everything is always going to be found in that left pocket. These proctors, I don't want them hunting and pecking for anything. I want to keep things simple, and I want to keep them used to always finding the information in the same place so they're not distracted. Priority for the test administrators is that they stay engaged in monitoring that room. Okay? In the right pocket of the same folder, we're always going to do the inventory list. This inventory list was super helpful. This would help me ensure that the folder went out with everything that was required. So seating chart, yes, I would circle here. Security log, yes, I would circle here, and I would just go down. So the shaded area was what was packed. On the return, I would check. Did the seating chart get returned? Yes. Was the header completed? Was it completed in ink? Was it signed? Was the time, whatever needs to be, whatever the criteria is. One of the worst things is to just take in material. All your proctors go back to class. You've got this big old hot mess on your table. You start sorting through things and you find all sorts of incomplete documents. You now have to chase down all these test administrators to finish all their documents correctly. You don't want to deal with that. You want to get them to do it right the first time, and you want to find the mistakes while they're still standing next to you returning materials. Then the student bathroom log. Then the seating chart, which was specific to each and every room with the header that they had to complete up top. Then the security log, then a cheat sheet, and this cheat sheet was what I deemed to be absolutely most important that they had to pay attention to, but somewhere on this cheat sheet I always put that they were also responsible for all the information in the test administration manual. They would sign, and I would sign, and I would have the room number and all the other information on this. And what this did was it made sure that none of the really egregious errors happened, that the privacy screens were checked and that they were up, that the signs were up, the do not disturb, the no electronics, that the student IDs were checked, that if there's a specific option that I want absolutely every room in the facility to provide the students with, because we're trying to maintain uniformity, then I'm going to tell them, hey, listen, on this page, on these pages, you're going to be given option. You're going to use option A on page whatever. I'm not going to leave it to their devices. I'm not going to leave it for them to remember, because I trained them a week ago and told them that we were going to use option A, but now they're sitting in the room. They don't remember what they were supposed to use. So I'm going to put that in for them. And then lastly, a bathroom pass. The bathroom pass always had the number that pertained to the lab or the test room that the student was assigned to. We had 3 buildings on campus. If the student was using a restroom in building 1 and a hall security monitor saw him and asked him for a pass, he would realize that the student wasn't testing and he had no reason for being over in building 1. So it would help avoid situations. You're going to train the administrators. When you train the administrators, make sure that you get the security agreement and the prohibited activities forms signed. The way that I used to do it was the first staff meeting, everybody's signing those forms. Simple reason why they're signing those forms, because if at the last minute I have a test administrator that doesn't show up that morning for whatever reason, I can grab anybody in that school and know that I don't have to worry about whether or not they signed one of these forms. I have a form on record for them. So the first staff meeting, I would take these 2 forms and I'd copy them back to back. Each person would get 1 sheet. I would tell them, flip your page over. It's 2-sided. Make sure you sign both sides. Give it back to me. And then I would keep track on a master list of all the faculty in my building, making sure that I got everybody that was in the building that was certified to sign off on one of these. And remember that you guys have to sign off on these as well. Always be clear, detailed, and consistent with your directions to the test administrators. Don't send mixed messages. Again, it's super important that they understand exactly what is expected of them. There's a lot of hands in this pot, but at the end of the day, the onus is going to fall on you. And you're going to be questioned as to why did that room not run properly? Did you train them? Show me the materials you trained them with. Did you tell them that this needed to be done? So don't leave any loose ends. Create a PowerPoint presentation, or you can customize. What I used to do was the same presentation that was given to the schools by the district, which will happen now in the spring. We just had the fall PowerPoint training that we did. I would take that same PowerPoint that was used to train you, and a lot of the information that is going to be pertinent also to the test administrators is already in there. So you have to change some words, you have to adapt some of the screenshots, or not the screenshots, the slides. But by and large, it's a great point of beginning, and you're surely not going to miss anything that way. Then to that, I would add anything that was specific to our school. Our testing dates, our bell schedules, our whatever, I would add it to that presentation. And then talk about training administrators and setting procedures for everything. Consider setting up procedures for the test administrators to use inside the test room or once they're in the test room. For example, I used to provide our test administrators with a clipboard. On said clipboard was the student roster. they were directed to stand at the doorway with that clipboard and that roster and check, cross-reference the student IDs to that roster. Once the two matched and the picture matched the person that was standing in front of them, so I basically did exactly what we do for SAT and ACT, then we would allow them into the room. We would then tell them, okay, everybody stands at the back of the room. Now, once everybody's in, the proctor, the test administrator comes in and says, okay, I want you to search your pockets for cell phones or electronic devices. If you have smartwatches on, remove them, turn off all devices, put them in your book bags, put the book bags at the front of the room. Once you've done that, return to the back of the room. Then I would tell the test administrators, now what you need to do is you've got to take all the material. Let's say there's an Algebra 1 test that you're giving. You're going to hold on in your hand the test authorization tickets, but in front of you at your desk, I want you to put down the formula sheets, the work folders, the calculators, and the pencils. I used to provide them with a box of pencils that I used to get real cheap through Walmart at the beginning of the school year. They were like 59 cents, something like that. And I would buy a bunch of these boxes, the bigger ones, and I would put a dry eraser, a dry marker. What else would I put in there? The 30 pencils or pens, depending on the exam that was being given, and a manual pencil sharpener, so that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that at least everybody in that room was going to have pencils and a pencil sharpener, and the teacher had something to write with, and the teacher had something to erase with. So we were good to go. So then as they called the student by their student authorization tickets, we would direct them, as we call your name, come up, pick up one of each of the items that's placed here on my desk, and I will send you to a seat. And then we would bounce from one side of the room to the other side of the room to break up the kids, right? And you know these kids, and the test administrators are going to know these kids. But so if you get to the next kid and he belongs on that side because the last kid you sent on the right, so now this one has to go to the left, but you know that it's not prudent to sit that kid over there, then tell your test administrators, yes, at that point you deviate and you send them to the right. And if you set up procedures, and it seems silly and it seems very, very like control freakish, but what it's going to do, it's going to help you ensure that there's very little deviation between the start and end times of these rooms. What you're trying to avoid is the teacher that is super organized and super streamlined and can get the room going in 10 minutes, and the other teacher that's taking 35 minutes and the room hasn't started yet because she passed out pencils first. Then she passed out the calculators. Then she went back and passed out the formula sheets. Then she went back and passed out the work folders. It'll take forever, right? And what you want is a good process in place that everybody can implement, that everybody can use to maintain uniformity, and so that you know that every room is being handled correctly. All right, so the final steps before testing. You need to figure out how you're going to prepare the materials for test day. Are you going to use folders? If you're going to use folders, then how are you going to set those up? Are you going to put the folders in the test bags? What is going to be included in that test bag or in those bins? Is it going to be the folder, the paper? How are you going to put everything together? Figure that out. You're going to create whatever notices need to be posted. If classes are being displaced, not a bad idea to put, because teachers will forget to tell their students from period to period. So take and just do quick and dirty signs and have somebody go around and post these signs on these doors saying, third period report to whatever room. Check all the rooms prior to testing. You need to make sure that all the equipment in the computer labs are functional. You want to make sure that you have enough desks and that all the desks are pointing in the right direction in the regular paper-based rooms. You want to make sure the visual cues are brought down in both rooms. You want to make sure the privacy screens are in place, and you want to make sure that your no electronic devices, testing in progress. I even had no vandalism tolerated signs up in all the rooms. The kids, particularly in the higher grades, are notorious for taking their pencils, jamming it in the earbud jack on the computers, and breaking the leads. So the morning of testing, you can't access that jack. So know ahead of time the situation that you have in all these rooms. Use your APs to help you sweep the rooms and make sure that everything's ready to go. Use a club to help you. Be creative and source people that can help you so that it all doesn't fall on you. Here's the daily testing notices. What you see here on the left-hand side is just a regular Excel sheet, but I used an operation available through a tool available through Excel that's called data subtotal. And what data subtotal does is that it chops up one continuous list by whatever qualifying information you want it to look for. So I said, okay, on this I did one list with the student ID, the student name, the grade, the room that they were supposed to test in, the test date that they had, and then homeroom teacher name and homeroom number at the end. I sorted it by homeroom teacher. Then I had the data subtotal run with the parameter of look for every change in teacher. So what it does is it chops up my list. So now I can print individual lists with the same header for each teacher. So you'll see up here, this is for ARCA, and she has these kids reporting to these rooms on this date. Then this one is for Avasani. This one's for Baldequin. I would print this out the night before and then go to their mailboxes and insert them in their mailboxes. That way, the morning of testing, they had instructions. It's 9:15. The following students have been scheduled for the Algebra 1 EOC. Please release the students for testing immediately after morning announcements. No guessing games. I didn't have to worry about forgetting to make an announcement or telling somebody to make an announcement. Teachers already knew what had to happen. Consider custom student authorization tickets. This ticket has all the information that a student would need and that you will need later on should anything happen. In the event of a desk audit, it is very handy to be able to reference exactly what session IDs that student used for their exam. So here it captured that information. It also captured the student signatures for both day 1 and day 2 so that they were acknowledging the devices, the no electronic device policy, the leaving campus, and the discussing test content after testing. If a student was invalidated for having a cell phone, and here it tells them whether it's on or off, it's not going to matter. You're still getting invalidated. So if they were invalidated and the parent called complaining, I immediately pulled this out and I said, well, listen, not only was it read to them by the test administrator during the instructions that were given to them from the test administration manual, but the student also had this, and clearly your son or daughter signed it. So that kind of quelched the whole thing right there. And again, you'll see down here that I made sure to include the testing date and the testing room. So I would have sorted this list by testing date and then testing room. I would have done a double sort so that when I printed this, I could easily just leaf through that bottom left right-hand corner and get all of room 1113, put them in the folder for 1113, then move on to the next room, grab those, etc. Okay. After the test, you're going to need to regroup. So it's a good thing to just kind of get feedback from everybody that was involved in the testing cycle and tweak things for the next test. If there was a lot of movement that was seen by your security guards, well, then try to find out from your test administrators what happened. Were they letting more than one student leave the room at any given time? If there were problems with specific computers in a room and a teacher tells you, listen, I had those 2 computers in that room didn't work. I had to switch both students out. It's important for you to know all of this so that you can take care of it prior to the next exam cycle, because During the spring, you're going to be wrapping one up, and immediately you're already jumping on the next one. So it's fast and furious. You want to make sure that you get all your materials ready again, get all those folders back, take out the old material, put in the new material for the next test administration, get those pencils sharpened, again, get people to help you. If there's a club, kids at CSI, whatever and wherever you can get manpower, do so. Just always be mindful of what you're having them do. And always remember, they cannot touch any of the sensitive or secure material. This is the timeline. I'll let you go through that, but basically it's everything that we just described. And helpful tips, we'll go over again what I've already told you. Plan ahead, use your resources, communicate with everybody at your school, be consistent and stay organized, but most of all, find a process that works for you. We've given you a lot of ideas here. None of this is mandatory, or wait, let me back that up. Some of the stuff is mandatory, but the procedure doesn't have to be done the way that we've described it here. It's best practices. It will help you keep your sanity. And for those of you who are married or have a relationship or a significant other, it will probably help preserve that relationship moving forward, because you're going to have a lot of stress, a lot of late nights, and a lot of early mornings. So always remember that the one and only place that you can cut corners with when it comes to testing and the jobs that you are now in is in being proficient, being technologically savvy, and being organized. That's it.
So now that Darma has talked about all of the, all the things that you're going to need to do with your staff and the building and all that stuff, how do you get it done? I know for me, when I took over testing, I had been a math teacher. I worked at a high school. I'd been a math teacher. And it was kind of like that tag you're it type thing, because nobody wanted to be the test chair. I'm calling it test chair because I haven't transitioned to school assessment coordinator. So back then I was a test chair. And I knew a little Excel. I knew very little Word. I knew kind of how to do a mail merge because I used to do my grades that way before we had the electronic grade book. But I wasn't proficient. I wasn't a power user, nothing. I knew simple formulas. I knew how to sort. I didn't know anything. I didn't know filtering. I didn't know pivot tables. There are a lot of stuff I didn't know. And there was no one really to ask except other test chairs from other schools, and a lot of them weren't very tech savvy back then. So I had to learn a lot of it on my own, and then I just made friends with other people who were getting more and more techy. We all taught ourselves these things. And I joined the Office of Assessment in 2011. So I was the first test chair that had been hired downtown. And, I brought a unique perspective. And one of the things I said is, you guys are good at telling us all the security procedures, and they're great. Like you guys have said, you call, someone always picks up the phone. You email, someone always gets back to you. But they weren't always able to tell us how to do it. And it's so individualized because you have to do what works in your school. Every school is different. You have unique students, you have unique faculty. But the nuts and bolts, how do I get a roster? Where does the information come from? What's the best program to use for all this stuff? And then when I was still a test chair, myself and a couple other friends, Darma included, we started recording these little modules. And then when Darma joined and started working at TDC, Darma and I said, and Darma especially, Darma was a big proponent of, we've got to do something for the testers, especially the new testers, because that first year, you don't know what you don't know. You don't even know what you should know a lot of times, and you just don't know where to begin. And so Darma's like, we got to at least do something. So we started baby steps. At the beginning of the year, we'd have this type of training. But during when we all kind of were back home in March, we were sent back home, and this whole Zoom thing was really actually a godsend at that point. Darma, Jennifer, and I got together and we started creating all of these Zoom sessions. And they were specific to how do you use Excel, because we didn't realize how many school assessment coordinators didn't even know basic Excel functions, how to filter, how to copy and paste, how to use File Download Manager. And this is all new to you guys. So we recorded these Zoom sessions and we posted them, but I want to go over some of the things that I want you to keep in mind that I really would advise you really need to brush up your skills on some of this stuff. So let's go over them. All right, first let's go over the district databases that you have. I know we're throwing a lot of alphabet soup at you. File Download Manager, I already talked about that. Please make sure you have access to that. You have to have it. That is going to be where you're going to get your lists from. So if you needed to get ready for even your interim assessments, if you want to find out where all your students are in the building during a given period, where all your math classes are, where all your language arts classes are, everything, scheduling information, everything, the teachers that teach them, everything is on File Download Manager. Now, if you wanted to look up students individually, you can use Student Performance Indicator or SPI or DSIS. That has all of the SPI has all the information regarding assessment, and DSIS obviously has all the. It's like a mainframe that's from years and years ago, but it's basically the data warehouse of our school system, and that has all the information, the parent contact information, all that stuff is also on DSIS. But that's good for looking up students individually. When you want a list of students, you want to use File Download Manager. This is a link to TDC's webpage, and let me show you that real quick. All right, so I'm just going to show you how you can navigate to it. This is obviously the Day of Schools page. You can go to Calendars, and then the link to the testing calendar. Bookmark this page. Obviously, here's the testing calendar. And like I said, especially this year with everything just so uncertain, just check back periodically and always make sure you have the most updated copy. But over to the left are some links that I want to go over very quickly. Right over here is the test chairperson information website. I spoke about that. And this is where the PowerPoints are posted, links to screencasts, documents, and they're sorted by program. And then also, here's TDC documents. So this is the web page that would have to do with the Testing Distribution Center. When you're getting ready to pack up, when you're getting ready to, if you need extra materials for paper-based tests, the links are here. This hasn't been updated. This still has Spring 2020, but Darma has some great files that are called Assessment at a Glance, and it's basically one big spreadsheet, and it has all of the spring assessments, when the return dates are, when the administration windows are, when to expect materials, all of that stuff is here. She has information on how to return materials. Here are the links to the order forms, but this is also a page you want to make sure that you're familiar with. And then that's just what I've just spoken about the TDC webpage. The Assessment Services app, that you want to make sure that you have access to. So let me explain that. That is where your principal went in and identified the school assessment team. So they've obviously identified you because that's how I received your information to invite you to this meeting. It's also where your principal would identify who the contact is to come pick up materials if it's not you. So let's say that you have a reading coach or somebody who happens to live around the TDC area and they're able to pick up something on their way to school. The person has to be on that list and have a TDC card, and Darma can talk about that in a little bit, in order to accept the materials or even drop things off. It's also the app that you're going to use when you want to order the accommodated paper base. Now, the webpage I just showed you, the TDC document, that's where you would order extra materials for a regular standard assessment. But if you have a student that has accommodated paper-based materials, in other words, they need large print or Braille, or the student has taken a computer-based test and they need a regular booklet, you would order it through this app. So obviously you need access to that. All right, so let's talk about the technology part and what Darma hit the nail on the head when she said you've got to become technology friendly. And like I said, when I first started, I knew how to type. I knew what Excel was. I knew how to open it, but I wasn't that great at it. It's practice, practice, practice. So like I said, we have made some YouTube videos. In fact, let me just very quickly go and just show you. Here's a link to our YouTube channel. I'm sorry, my computer's a little slow. Here we go. Okay, there's our YouTube channel. The way it's listed is these are the recorded sessions that we did over the summer. It was Darma, myself, and Jennifer Fernandez. And so you're going to see presented by, and the names are different, but the topics are all the same. And the reason why the three of us did it was we had so many sessions running every day, and we just recorded a bunch of them. So you might see multiple presenters for the same topic. It's basically the same information, but I'm going to touch on some of these subjects. But I mean, just if you're really not that familiar with Excel, start with the filter, copy, and paste and sort. Those are basic Excel functions. We do everything from very simple functions, and then we get more involved with mail merge. Here's videos on mail merge, Kimberly, so you're going to want to watch that. I'll go over mail merge in a minute. Mail merge is awesome, by the way. Once you learn it, and it's very easy to do, you will love it. Index match, I'll touch on that. Remember when Darma was talking about if you have two Excel sheets, and let's say one has the student ID and whatever information, then you have another Excel sheet. It's a separate sheet. It also has a student ID, but maybe there's a field on this one that you want on this one. Have you ever had that happen where you would just love to merge the two Excel sheets? You can do that with index match, and Darma has a very good video on how to do that. Shortcuts, you know, I'm still learning shortcuts, and I've been using Excel for years and years and years. I would consider myself a semi-advanced user, and I was learning stuff this summer when I was Googling stuff and we were putting this presentation together. You know, obviously shortcuts like Control-C, Control-V, but we've got even more advanced shortcuts that maybe you haven't heard of, but those are pretty useful. So these are some of the topics that we cover in our YouTube video. Google Forms. We have been using that more and more. A lot of the links that I've been sending you have been through Google Sheets or Google Forms. For Google Forms, learning how to create surveys, maybe you are sending out a questionnaire to your staff and you need them to reply back. Google Forms has a great way to not only have them answer, but then it puts all the information that you've collected from the survey straight into an Excel sheet, so you have all the information there. Google Calendar, that is something that Darma has a lot more experience with that. I don't have as much, but Darma's converted me a lot to a lot of the Google stuff. Obviously, you would never want to put anything personal on your Google Drive. No personal student information can go on a Google Drive. It would just be generic stuff, maybe forms that you want your staff to have access to. It's just a great way to share things that you're not constantly emailing stuff, and that you can have a link and your staff knows to go there and see that. The Google Calendar, I think, is great in that, let's say you wanted to publish your testing calendar and you just wanted to let them know which days the computer labs will be used, or which days you're going to be testing what exam. For elementary schools, which days you're having which days grade 3 is testing, grade 4 is testing, so on and so forth. You can publish that and just have your staff, and you can publish it as a view only so they can't manipulate it. But it's a great way to share information. Like Darma said, information is key. You have to make sure your lines of communication are open with everybody, and that it takes a village to make this happen. So you want to make sure everyone's on the same page. One more thing I want to show you is this is a great resource sheet. Here, this one. Sorry, my computer is very slow. There we go. So if you follow this link, here's the link to the YouTube videos, and we've taken each topic on the YouTube channel, put a direct link. We just randomly chose a link, and remember, for some of these Zoom videos, there might be 3 different presenters, so we just randomly chose one. And then whatever documents we use while doing that training are listed there. And if you've never used Google Sheets, just hover over the link. You'll see a little thumbnail, and then you want to click on the link right here, and then it'll open up. But these are some of the topics that we've done. File Download Manager, if you're not that familiar with it, I take you through how to sort of navigate through File Download Manager. And then, of course, the Mail Merge. I'm going to go over a couple more of these. Pivot tables. Where's my pivot table? Oh, you guys have to look at pivot tables. Here, I'll go. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm a nerd, I know. All right, so hopefully those resources will be helpful. I've never used this, but Darma has. This is a link to Skillport. You can get master plan points for taking these classes online. And they offer classes in Microsoft productivity, like, Word, Excel, all of those. I think even Access might be on here. I've never used, okay, so most test chairs will end up using Excel. It's very point and click and very easy, intuitive to get around. Microsoft Access, a lot of high school test chairs use it. It's really powerful. It's really cool, but it's not as intuitive. And I believe they might offer classes on that, and check it out if you want to. But Microsoft Access is a very powerful, it's a database tool, so it's very powerful. And then when you're done with all the YouTube videos, you're going to have a roster that looks like this. I'm being facetious there. Darma and I are night and day. This is Darma's, by the way. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Mine were black and white, but the data was good. So the data might be there, but the presentation on Darma's are visually stunning. But basically what I'm trying to say is, so here's your Excel document, and by the time that you have hopefully gone through a lot of those videos, you've downloaded your File Download Manager. So we have the original data download here. After you've filtered and sorted and copied and pasted, and basically you start out with a huge list, and you keep paring down and chipping away to the students that you're going to be testing. And then you can just make new tabs. You have tabs for who's covering, tabs for emailing notices to or teacher list to homeroom, all of that. Your if you have your attendance roster, you've got your attendance data here. So basically, hopefully, by the time that you view those YouTube videos, you'll feel more comfortable putting something together. It doesn't have to be color like this, but it's very pretty. This is something also that you can want to keep track of. These are the test administrator notices. It details their proctoring assignments. As long as there's no personal information, this is something you could use on or publish with Google Sheets so that your faculty can look at it. But there's just a lot you can do with Excel. So let me go over some specific functions in Excel that I have found incredibly helpful. And I mentioned pivot tables. So if you have a lot of, so pivot table is something where if you want a quick little snapshot. So let's say in this example on the screen, your administrator wants to know a countdown of your ESOL students. So you have your big, huge list. To do a pivot table, it's literally dragging. If you can drag and drop something, you can create a pivot table. And we go through that in the YouTube video. But from this big, huge list, we are able to, down here, see specifically, because we've chosen those fields, what our ELL population even break down by level. So a pivot table will take a huge bunch of information, and according to what criteria you select, it'll pare down and give you summative data. Here's another example. So this is it's a fake list, by the way. These are not real names. So this is a list, and we got this list from File Download Manager. These are all the course titles. And let's say I'm working at a high school and I wanted to find out, I wanted a quick count, just a quick count of how many students I needed to worry about for EOC testing. So I would create a pivot table. And from this list, I can create a pivot table that looks like this. So what we did here is we took the course information right here and we created a pivot table and we asked it to list the courses, and we chose the courses to put there. Obviously, this is a little old because I have Algebra 2 here, but we listed the courses, and then we asked in the pivot table, we wanted an end count. So in this example for Algebra 1, we have 146 and 8 students. For biology, we've got this many. For geometry, this many. And all I've done is I literally, in my pivot table, drag the course name into the rows, and then in my column, ask for the end count. I can get a lot more fancy with pivot tables. If I wanted to keep my rows the same, and that would be the course names, and let's say now I wanted to see a breakdown by period. So this is showing me, this school happens to have 6 periods a day, and it's telling me where the students are in period 1 for that particular course. So for Algebra 1, I don't have any students in period 1. But this is where they are for the rest of the periods that day. So stuff like this, you can get a very quick count, very quick listing of where your students are in the building. All right, let's talk about mail merge real quick. So for mail merge, you need 2 things. You need a Word document and you need a data source. Basically, mail merge is taking your data source and it's listing that data source and making whatever your Word document is personalized. So for example, a pass, student tickets for testing. If I've got something on Excel and I've created a template in Word, I can merge them so that the fields show up on the whatever the product that I output. It would come out as either a Word document, you can make it a PDF, and then you can either save it or print it. Obviously, you don't want to email. You can email with mail merge, but you don't want to email anything with private information. And then Darma had already spoken about this example. This is a finished product of a mail merge. It's very easy to do. Just follow the directions in the YouTube video. It's very easy to set up. Probably the hardest part is just creating the letter and making it, and you can make it look however you want it to look. You can put the fields anywhere you want. You just literally place the holders in the spaces there, and then it just merges the personalized information so that when you're done and you print it off, every single letter that you're printed off is personalized for that student and only that student's information. So think of a row of an Excel and it's going across that row and it's putting whatever is in that cell for that row, whatever you've chosen. I used it a lot. For me, I worked in a high school. I used to do this for their, not only their student tickets, because I preferred doing everything myself in terms of what I gave out to the student rather than relying on what was in Tide or Pearson. So I preferred doing it myself so I could personalize it. I could put all the what I called CYA information down here. It was specific to our school. If I had a lunch schedule that they had to follow for that day, the student had it in front of them. And yes, I would waste 5 or 6 reams of paper and pass it out to the students, but they had it in their hand and they kept it. They kept it for the whole testing season. This is called Excel subtotal function, and this is something Darma touched on. So let me explain. So imagine you have an Excel roster. Think of one continuous sheet where you have all your students listed. And let's say you want to print out the rosters or the attendance sheet for that day. Probably what you do is you copy and paste and create a new tab for room 201 and copy the kids that are going in 201 into that tab. And you copy and paste so you have open up all of these tabs. Yes, you can absolutely do that. That works. I always made stupid mistakes copying and pasting. And then if a student changed, I'd have to change them on my main list and then change them again in the tab that I created. This, you don't have to do that. You can literally print from the full roster and not copy and paste anything. So what I did, I just wanted to show this to you because it's hard to explain, but I made a video of me doing it. So this is obviously, whoops, let me stop it. This is obviously a fake roster. And what I've done here is this column right here has where the student will go on this day. I've sorted it according to room number. So the students are grouped into room number. What Excel subtotal function is going to do is I'm going to ask it, hey, every time the room number changes, so right here, the room number changes from 1234 to 1235. I want you to insert a page break. So it's automatically going to break up the pages for me. So watch it. It literally, I can do this. Now I've sorted it the way I wanted to sort it. It's literally going to happen in like 3 clicks. Watch this. Okay, there we go. So I'm going through, I'm hitting data, and don't worry, we go over exactly what you're supposed to do in the video, but I just wanted you to see how easy this is. I make 2 clicks and I hit OK. All right, let me pause it right here. It automatically inserts, see this dotted line? That's a page break. So when I go to print this, it's automatically going to stop right here. And the identification information, like the row up here, that would be the header, we've just put in the header of the page. So it'll print on each page, and we go over that in the video as well. But I'm going to click play and continue this. So I go through, I scroll down. I want you guys to see how it's inserted a page break every single time the room number changes. And then the beauty of this is now when I go to print. So I just go to File and Print, and there's my print preview. And see, now, and this right up here is on the header of the page. So it's going to appear on every single page. And then you can put whatever you want in the header and the footer if you needed a signature, whatever. But see how easy that was? In 2 clicks, we did that. And it saves you from copying and pasting a million times over. I just wanted to show you that because it's not something that I knew about. Darma, again, showed that to me, and it was a real lifesaver. All right, so you guys are on your way. I wanted to stop and see if you guys had any questions.